Electric vehicles were the highlight in the latest series of CNA Green Plan events. And these are organised by Mediacorp to generate more awareness of sustainability issues. On the back of the Singapore Green Plan 2030, the government wants more people to drive EVs and is set to build 60,000 EV charging points over the next 8 years. CNA was in Jurong Spring to showcase electric vehicles and debunk common misconceptions about owning them. Residents were able to interact with industry experts to know more about the cost and maintenance of EVs. Some were even given a chance to test drive an EV for themselves. And from all this, we have Paul Welsford. He's Vice President of the Electric Vehicle Association of Singapore. Mr. Welsford, you were there at this event to speak to some residents in Jurong Spring. What, for you, were the most common misconceptions about electric vehicles?
Thank you. Yeah, one of the main questions we got was, are EVs going to have different plug types? Am I going to have a situation where I'm going to have to use a different type of plug? And although this can be true in other countries, here in Singapore, we have standardized on the type of plug. And so right now, 99% of the EVs which are on the road in Singapore will work with pretty much every single AC and DC charger here. But that was, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions I heard.
Mr. Welsford, our Finance Minister, Lawrence Wong, has said that the government is going to further accelerate EV adoption by building more of those charging points. Those cars need to be juiced up in order for them to go anywhere. Access is going to be critical if you want more people to buy those cars. Tell us more about how important our infrastructure upgrade is at this point, now that we're shifting to these greener vehicles.
Yeah, it's really important right now that we do improve the infrastructure. So the majority of the places where EVs are going to charge up are going to be inside of car parks. And car parks really have been designed and created to maximize the number of spaces, and also the energy use there really has only been for things like electricity for the lights, and maybe for things like the gantry entries, not really geared up for high-powered electric vehicle charging stations. So we are going to need to upgrade the infrastructure in these locations to be able to install the number of chargers needed to hit that 2030 goal.
And Mr. Welsford, these charging points, they are not all the same. Should high-powered, fast charging points be given priority, or should we focus more on the slower overnight charging stations?
So I would say that both are equally important, but for different areas. Things like the high-powered charging stations, these are really, really important for high-mileage fleet type of drivers who are having to do hundreds of kilometers a day and really need to top up quickly to get the vehicles back on the road. The slow chargers also have a really important role to play and will probably be the bulk of all the EV charging stations which we see in Singapore. And these are the ones which are going to be for overnight charging at places like HDBs, at condominiums, during the day charging at office spaces. So I would say that they are equally important, but for different reasons.
And Mr. Welsford, it has been something of a challenge to get people interested in EV cars to sort of buy them, because we've had a limitation in the kinds of models, as an example. Infrastructure, again, as you mentioned before, that's been a challenge. But we are seeing a rise in registrations now for this year. So is this going to continue?
I certainly hope so. And everything which we're seeing is that is the trend which people are going towards. So we did see a large rise, and especially in the second half of last year. And I believe in November, we saw over 9% of all the registrations of vehicles were battery electric vehicles. And as more options come onto the market, as cheaper options come onto the market, as more EV charging stations become available in places where people regularly park their vehicles, it's going to give people more of a reason to get an electric vehicle, because the fear is often range anxiety, or it's probably closer to charger anxiety here in Singapore. Range is usually not an issue, but it's worrying about where your next charger is going to be. And if more chargers are going to be there, it's going to give people that option to at least consider an EV. And as they start to see that there are rebates for those electric vehicles right now, things like the early adopter rebates, things like the vehicle emissions scheme, it's showing that they can be affordable. And when they start to realize how much cheaper they are to operate, how much cheaper they are to maintain, it really does become a really obvious option for many drivers.
Well, it may be good for drivers, but certainly in terms of government's planning for this, it may not be quite so affordable. So, for example, you want charging stations. There will be competition for space. In Singapore, we're very short of space as it is. Do you see this as a challenge, especially for rollouts in HDB estates?
So I don't see that as being a major challenge. The main reason for that being is that we do have plenty of car parking spaces in Singapore. We have way more car parking spaces than we do have of vehicles. And not every single one of those car parking spaces is going to have an electric vehicle charging station, because not every single electric vehicle is going to have to charge every single day. The majority will only have to charge every 4 to 5, maybe even 7 days. So I don't see there being an issue of increased competition stopping the rollout. I see only competition really helping the rollout, meaning that charging stations are going to go into more places to support more people as more and more EVs come onto the road.
And thank you very much for that. Joining us today, Paul Welsford, Vice President of the Electric Vehicle Association of Singapore.